Andrew took a deep breath as the yellow school bus pulled up to the curb. Through the window, he could see the brick building of Westfield High School looming ahead. New school. New town. New everything. This is it, he whispered to himself, clutching his backpack straps a little tighter. His dad had gotten the hospital job offer just 2 months ago. It's a great opportunity, his parents had said. Better pay, better schools. What they didn't say, but Andrew knew anyway, was that their family would be one of the only black families in this wealthy suburban neighborhood. The bus doors swung open with a hiss. Andrew stepped down onto the sidewalk, following the stream of students heading toward the entrance. Nobody looked at him. Nobody said hello. That was both a relief and somehow worse than being stared at. Inside, the hallway buzzed with first-day energy. Friends who hadn't seen each other all summer hugged and laughed. Seniors strutted confidently, while freshmen huddled in nervous groups. Andrew belonged to neither. He was a sophomore, but a brand new one, the outsider. He pulled the crumpled schedule from his pocket and squinted at the room numbers. First period. Advanced Calculus with Mr. Reynolds, room 203. Andrew had always been good at math. Back at his old school, that had been something to be proud of. Here, he wasn't sure if it would make him stand out in a good way or a bad one. Room 203 was already half full when Andrew walked in. He chose a seat in the middle row, not hiding in the back, but not drawing attention up front either. As more students filed in, Andrew noticed how they filled every seat except the ones nearest to him. By the time the bell rang, there was an empty chair on either side of him in an otherwise packed classroom. The teacher, a tall man with glasses and a friendly smile, introduced himself as Mr. Reynolds. "Welcome to Advanced Calculus. Let's start with a little problem to get our brains working again after summer." He wrote a complex equation on the board. Anyone want to give this a try? The room fell silent. Students looked down at their notebooks or suddenly became very interested in the ceiling tiles. Mr. Reynolds waited patiently, then his eyes landed on Andrew. "How about you? Would you like to try?" Andrew felt every eye in the room turn to him. His heart pounded. He could feel sweat forming on his palms. But the equation, that was something he understood. Numbers didn't care what you looked like or where you came from. "The answer is -7, Andrew said, his voice steadier than he expected. Mr. Reynolds raised his eyebrows. "That's correct. Could you explain how you got there?" Andrew walked through the steps, gaining confidence with each word. When he finished, Mr. Reynolds nodded approvingly. "Excellent work. It seems we have a natural mathematician joining us this year." A few students murmured. Andrew couldn't tell if it was appreciation or annoyance. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of new teachers, new classrooms, and the constant feeling of being watched without being seen. By lunchtime, Andrew's stomach was growling, but the thought of figuring out where to sit in the cafeteria made him more nervous than any math problem. He joined the lunch line, trying to look casual as he scanned the room. Tables seemed to be divided by invisible but strict boundaries. Athletes here, drama kids there, smart kids in the corner. Andrew picked up his tray of pizza and fruit, took a deep breath, and headed toward an empty spot at a table near the windows. Just as he was about to sit down, a foot shot out, catching his ankle. Andrew stumbled, his tray tilting. The pizza slid off, landing sauce side down on the floor. His apple rolled away under another table. "Oops," said a voice dripping with fake concern. "Didn't see you there." Andrew looked up to see a boy with perfectly styled hair and an expensive-looking watch. Behind him, several other boys snickered. The boy, clearly someone important in the school hierarchy, made a show of checking his shoe for scuffs. "You might want to watch where you're going," he said, just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Wouldn't want to make a mess on your first day." Andrew stood frozen, painfully aware of how many people were watching. The cafeteria had grown quieter, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. "I'll get another tray," Andrew said finally, bending to pick up the fallen pizza. "Yeah, you do that," the boy replied, turning back to his friends who were still laughing. As Andrew walked back to the lunch line, he heard whispers following him. He kept his eyes forward, his back straight. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him upset. "Hey," said the lunch lady when he reached the counter again. She'd seen what happened. Her eyes were kind. "Take this one on the house, honey." Andrew nodded gratefully, accepting the new tray. This time, he found a seat at a nearly empty table in the corner. He ate quickly, trying to be invisible. First day at Westfield High, and he already knew exactly where he stood on the outside looking in. But as the final bell rang that afternoon, Andrew made a promise to himself. He wouldn't stay on the outside forever. Somehow, someway, he would find his place here, even if he had to make it himself. The hallways of Westfield High seemed to grow longer with each passing day for Andrew. 2 weeks had gone by since his first day, and things were only getting worse. Every morning, he'd take a deep breath before pushing open the heavy front doors, his stomach tight with worry about what might happen. "Look who it is," whispered a voice as Andrew walked to his locker. It was Tim, the basketball team captain, nudging his friends and smirking. Andrew kept his eyes down and moved faster, but not fast enough to miss hearing Tim say, "Bet he thinks he's special because he got that A on the chemistry test." Andrew had indeed scored the highest grade on yesterday's exam, but instead of feeling proud, he now wished he'd purposely gotten a few answers wrong. The better he did in class, the more the other kids seemed to hate him. His locker had become a place he dreaded. Today, like most days recently, a folded note fell out when he opened it. The words inside made his chest hurt. "Go back where you came from. Nobody wants you here." Andrew quickly crumpled it up before anyone could see, adding it to the growing collection he kept hidden in his desk drawer at home. In history class, the teacher announced a group project. "Find partners and form groups of 3, she said cheerfully. Andrew watched as students quickly grabbed their friends' arms, chairs scraping across the floor as everyone scrambled to form groups. He sat alone, raising his hand after everyone else was settled. "I don't have a group," he said quietly. The teacher looked around the room. "Who has space for one more?" The silence was painful until she finally assigned him to work with 2 boys who couldn't hide their annoyance. "Just don't mess this up for us," one of them muttered when the teacher walked away. "We actually care about our grades." Andrew bit his tongue. He had the highest average in the class, but pointing that out would only make things worse. Lunchtime was the hardest part of the day. The cafeteria was like a map of who belonged where, and there was no spot marked for him. He found an empty corner at a table near the trash cans. As he carefully unpacked the lunch his mom had made, his favorite spicy chicken sandwich, he felt something hit the back of his head. A balled-up napkin, then another. He didn't turn around. He knew who it was. "Hey, new kid," Tim called out, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I heard you only got into advanced math because they needed to fill a quota. Is that true?" Several students laughed. Andrew took another bite of his sandwich, trying to pretend he couldn't hear. His appetite was gone, but he kept eating anyway. His mom had woken up early to make this lunch, and he wouldn't waste it. At home, Andrew became a different person. He smiled when his parents asked about school, making up stories about friendly classmates and interesting lessons. "School's fine" became his standard answer. His parents had enough stress with their new jobs and settling into a neighborhood where they were the only black family on the block. His dad worked late hours at the hospital, and his mom was trying to rebuild her client base as a freelance graphic designer. They were doing all this for him, for his future. The last thing they needed was to worry about him too. Late at night, when the house was quiet, Andrew would sit at his desk with his laptop, searching for stories about people who looked like him who had changed the world despite the odds. He read about famous black scientists, inventors, writers, and leaders. He saved their pictures, printed their quotes, and taped them to the wall beside his bed when no one else could see. "They tried to stop you too," he whispered to the faces on his wall. "But you didn't let them." Some nights, he wondered if coming to this town had been a mistake. Maybe it would be easier to be average in a place where he fit in than excellent in a place where he didn't. But then he'd remember his grandmother's words from the day they left their old neighborhood. "Your mind is a gift. Don't let anyone make you hide your light." Andrew would touch the one photo of his grandma that he kept on his nightstand. "I'm trying," he'd tell her, "but it's really hard right now." Then he'd open his textbooks and study late into the night, preparing for the next day's classes. He wasn't just studying to get good grades anymore. Each correct answer, each perfect test, had become his quiet way of fighting back. Andrew walked into the school gym that morning with a proud smile he couldn't hide. After weeks of late nights and careful work, his science fair project was finally ready. He built a small solar array that could power a water filtration system, something that combined his love for renewable energy with a solution for communities without clean water. "Watch where you're going," Tim muttered, bumping into Andrew's shoulder as he passed. Andrew steadied his project board and kept moving toward his assigned table. The gym buzzed with excitement as students set up their displays. Andrew had spent hours making his presentation look professional. His dad had even helped him print color graphs at the office. The judging wouldn't start until tomorrow afternoon, but today was for setting up and doing final checks. "That actually looks pretty cool," said a quiet voice. Andrew turned to see Leon, a boy from his math class who'd never spoken to him before. "How does it work?" For a few minutes, Andrew felt normal as he explained how the solar cells connected to the pump system. Leon asked good questions and seemed genuinely interested. But the moment was cut short when Tim and his friends walked by, making Leon suddenly remember he needed to be somewhere else. "See you around," Leon said, quickly walking away. Andrew stayed late after school, making small adjustments to his display. He wanted everything to be perfect. Mr. Daniels, the science teacher, stopped by to check on him. "This is impressive work, Andrew," he said, examining the solar cells. "You've got a real shot at winning this thing." Those words stayed with Andrew as he finally packed up and headed home. For once, he felt hopeful. Maybe winning the science fair could change things for him. Maybe the other kids would see him differently. The next morning, Andrew almost ran to school. He couldn't wait to do one final check on his project before classes started. But when he pushed open the gym doors, his heart dropped to his stomach. His display board lay flat on the table, the carefully created graphs and diagrams torn down the middle. The solar array he'd built had been pulled apart, wires snipped and panels cracked. Scrawled across his poster in thick black marker were words that made his eyes burn with tears. "Know your place." Andrew stood frozen, staring at months of work destroyed in an instant. The gym was empty this early. No one saw him pick up a piece of his broken solar panel, turning it over in his hands. No one saw his shoulders begin to shake. He sat down on the floor behind his table, drew his knees to his chest, and let the tears come. He cried for his ruined project. He cried for all the notes in his locker, the whispers in the hallway, the lonely lunches. He cried because he was tired of being strong. "Why do they hate me so much?" he whispered to the empty gym. "What did I ever do to them?" Andrew didn't know how long he sat there before he pulled out his phone. His finger hovered over his dad's number. He could call him, tell him everything. His parents would be angry. They might even go to the principal. But then what? Things would probably get worse. He put his phone away and wiped his face on his sleeve. Then he noticed something under the table, his flash drive. They hadn't found it. The one with all his research, his design files, and his presentation. At least he still had that. Andrew thought about his grandmother's picture on his nightstand. What would she say right now? Her voice seemed to fill his head. "Your brilliance isn't for hiding. It's your weapon and your shield." He stood up slowly, gathering the pieces of his project. He checked his watch. 6 hours until judging. Not enough time to rebuild everything, but maybe. A new idea began forming in his mind. What if he could make something even better? Something that showed not just solar energy at work, but tracked the efficiency in real time. He'd been wanting to add that feature, but hadn't had time. Well, now he had no choice. Andrew picked up his backpack and the flash drive. He'd need Mr. Daniels' help. He'd need to skip classes. He'd need to work faster than he ever had before. As he walked out of the gym, something had changed in his walk. His shoulders were back, his steps purposeful. The tears had dried on his face, leaving something harder, more determined in their place. They thought they'd broken him. They thought they'd put him in his place. But they'd made a big mistake. Because now Andrew wasn't just working to win anymore. He was working to show them, and himself, exactly what he was made of. The science fair buzzing with excitement felt like another world to Andrew. 6 hours earlier, he'd been sitting on the gym floor surrounded by his destroyed project, fighting back tears. Now he stood tall beside his rebuilt display, explaining his work to the third judge of the day. "So this interface shows the energy conversion in real time?" asked Dr. Powell, a woman with gray streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She adjusted her glasses as she studied the small screen Andrew had added to his solar array. "Yes, ma'am," Andrew replied, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "The system tracks efficiency throughout the day and logs how weather conditions affect output." He pointed to the graph on his rebuilt display board. "These are the projections for cloudy versus sunny days." What Andrew didn't mention was how Mr. Daniels had let him use the engineering lab all day, writing him passes to skip his other classes. How he'd worked through lunch without stopping, how his fingers were still cut from rushing to reassemble the broken pieces. How he'd nearly given up 3 different times but pushed through anyway. Dr. Powell made some notes on her clipboard, her expression giving nothing away. "Very impressive work, young man," she said finally. "Not just the science, but the presentation. Thank you." As she walked away, Andrew let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That was the last judge. Now all he could do was wait. He looked around at the other projects. Tim's volcano sat a few tables away, puffing out vinegar-smelling smoke on command. It had drawn laughs from younger kids all afternoon, but Andrew had noticed the judges spending less time there than at other displays. The announcement wouldn't come until after school. Andrew sat alone on a bench outside the gym, too nervous to eat the sandwiches Mom had packed. He scrolled through physics videos on his phone to distract himself. "Mind if I join you?" Andrew looked up to see a tall man in a navy blue suit standing beside the bench. He recognized him as one of the judges, though he hadn't come to Andrew's table. "No, sir," Andrew said, moving his backpack to make room. "I'm Dr. Thomas," the man said as he sat down. "I teach physics at State University." Andrew straightened up. "Nice to meet you, sir." "I saw your project earlier. The solar efficiency tracker." Couldn't get a closer look because Dr. Powell was taking her time. His deep laugh put Andrew at ease. "That's actually a good sign." Andrew smiled for what felt like the first time in days. "Been interested in renewable energy long?" Dr. Thomas asked. Before Andrew knew it, they were deep in conversation about solar technology, discussing ideas Andrew had only read about online. Dr. Thomas listened intently, asking questions that made Andrew think harder than any class assignment ever had. "You've got a real mind for this," Dr. Thomas said, checking his watch. "I should get back. They'll be announcing soon." As they walked back toward the gym, Andrew noticed something he hadn't before. Dr. Thomas was black, like him. Seeing a black scientist, someone who'd made it in a field Andrew dreamed about, made something warm settle in his chest. The gym was packed when they returned. Parents stood along the walls while students clustered together in nervous groups. Andrew found a spot near the back, alone again. The principal tapped the microphone. "After careful consideration, our judges have made their decisions." Andrew held his breath as the third-place winner was called, then second, not his name. And first place, advancing to the state competition next month. The principal paused, building suspense. Andrew Wilson for his solar efficiency tracking system. For a moment, Andrew couldn't move. Had he heard right? The applause started and someone nudged him forward. Somehow his feet carried him to the front of the gym. As the principal handed him the blue ribbon, Andrew finally saw the faces in the crowd. Mr. Daniels was clapping loudly. Dr. Thomas stood nearby, nodding with approval. And there, by the door, were his parents, his mom with tears in her eyes, his dad filming everything on his phone. They must have gotten his text after all. Andrew's hands shook as he accepted the ribbon. "Thank you," he managed to say. Leaving the stage, he passed Tim and his friends. Their faces were tight with surprise and something else. Anger, maybe, or confusion. But for once, Andrew didn't look away. He met their eyes directly, the blue ribbon clutched firmly in his hand. As he reached his parents, his mom hugged him tight. "We're so proud of you," she whispered. Over her shoulder, Andrew saw Dr. Thomas approaching with Dr. Powell beside him. "Andrew," Dr. Thomas said, "we'd like to talk to you about a summer program at the university." He handed Andrew a card. "A mind like yours shouldn't wait for college to start doing real research." For the first time since coming to this school, Andrew felt something new taking root inside him, not just hope, but possibility. 3 weeks after winning the science fair, Andrew sat in Mr. Daniels' classroom during lunch, sketching ideas in his notebook. The door opened, and Mr. Daniels walked in with a smile. "I talked to the principal," he said, dropping into the chair next to Andra. "We got approval for the STEM club. We can use this room on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school." Andrew's face lit up. Since his win, he'd been thinking about ways to channel his energy into something bigger than just his own success. The idea for a science, technology, engineering, and math club had come to him during one of his weekly video calls with Dr. Thomas. "That's awesome," Andrew said, flipping his notebook to show Mr. Daniels his list of possible club activities. "I was thinking we could start with some simple robot building kits to get people interested." "Perfect," Mr. Daniels nodded. "The science department has some old kits we can use. Now we just need to get the word out and see who shows up." By Thursday, Andrew had put up posters around school and made announcements in his classes. He tried to ignore the butterflies in his stomach as the final bell rang. What if nobody came? He arranged chairs in a circle and set out snacks his mom had helped him pack. Mr. Daniels gave him an encouraging nod from his desk. At 3:15, the door pushed open. It was Leon from math class, the boy who had briefly shown interest in Andrew's science project. "Hey," Leon said, looking around. "Is this the right place for the robot thing?" Andrew nodded, relief washing over him. "Yeah, come on in." Two girls from his chemistry class arrived next, then a freshman boy Andrew didn't know. By 3:30, 11 students had settled into chairs, munching on cookies and looking at Andrew expectantly. "Thanks for coming," Andrew began, his voice steadier than he expected. "I thought we could start by talking about what kinds of projects interest everyone." As students shared ideas, from app development to environmental engineering, Andrew wrote everything down on the board. The conversation flowed more easily than he'd hoped. These weren't the popular kids or the troublemakers, they were the quiet ones who liked figuring things out, just like him. Then the door opened again. Andrew froze mid-sentence. It was Mike, Tim's younger brother, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Mike was a sophomore known mainly for being Tim's shadow. "Is it too late to join?" Mike asked, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. Andrew hesitated only for a second. "No, come in, we're just getting started." As the weeks passed, the STEM club became Andrew's favorite part of school. Every meeting, they worked on different projects, with Andrew and Mr. Daniels guiding everyone through the basics of coding and engineering. To Andrew's surprise, Mike showed up faithfully, though he struggled with the technical aspects more than others. One afternoon, as most members packed up to leave, Andrew noticed Mike staring helplessly at his half-assembled robot. "Want some help?" Andrew offered, pulling up a chair. Mike looked up, his face a mix of frustration and embarrassment. "I don't get any of this," he admitted. "And I'm failing physics. My dad's gonna kill me if I don't pass." Andrew thought about all the times Mike's brother had shoved him in the hallway or knocked books from his hands. It would be easy to walk away. Instead, he sat down. "Look, the coding part is tough at first, but once you get the basic commands down, it makes more sense." For the next hour, Andrew walked Mike through the robot programming, explaining concepts the way Dr. Thomas had explained things to him, step by step, with real-world examples. "You're actually pretty good at teaching," Mike said as their robot finally moved forward on command. "Thanks for not giving up on me." "No problem," Andrew replied, surprised to find he meant it. The next club meeting, Andrew proposed a new project, developing an app to connect students with community service opportunities. "We could map out where help is needed," he explained, "and match people's skills to different projects. It could help everyone find meaningful ways to give back." The idea caught fire. For the next month, club members worked in teams, coding different parts of the app. Even Mike contributed, helping design the user interface once Andrew discovered he had a good eye for design. When the local newspaper ran a story about the app, complete with a photo of the STEM club members gathered around Andrew, something shifted in the school's atmosphere. Teachers who had once overlooked Andrew now stopped him in hallways to discuss his work. Students who had never spoken to him began nodding hello. Tim still glared whenever they passed each other, but fewer people laughed at his comments now. The balance was shifting, not through confrontation, but through creation. "You know what the best revenge is?" Dr. Thomas had told Andrew during one of their mentoring calls. "It's not getting even, it's getting ahead." Looking around at what he built, not just robots and apps, but a community, Andrew finally understood what he meant. 6 months after arriving as the new kid that nobody wanted to talk to, Andrew walked through the halls of Westfield High with a different kind of confidence. It wasn't the loud, showy kind that Tim and his friends had. It was quieter, steadier, born from knowing exactly who he was and what he could do. The STEM Club had grown to 25 members, and their latest project was Andrew's most ambitious yet. They were partnering with Eastside High, a school from the inner city, for a joint robotics competition. Two schools that had never worked together before, building bridges through technology. The Eastside team is coming tomorrow for our first joint practice, Andrew announced at the end of their Thursday meeting. Let's make sure we have everything ready. Mike raised his hand. My dad can bring pizza for everyone. He owns that place downtown. Andrew smiled. That would be great. Thanks, Mike. As the meeting wrapped up, Andrew noticed Leon hovering near the door. Everything okay? Andrew asked. Leon shuffled his feet. Just heard some stuff, he mumbled. Tim and some seniors were talking about how they don't want those Eastside kids coming here. Andrew's stomach tightened. The robotics partnership had been his idea, something he'd worked on for weeks. Dr. Thomas had even helped him connect with the science teacher at Eastside. Thanks for telling me, Andrew said, trying to keep his voice calm. I'll talk to Mr. Daniels about it. But the next morning, Andrew didn't need to tell anyone. The message was clear for all to see, spray-painted across the main entrance of the school, EAST ID trash stay out. Andrew stared at the ugly words, his hands clenching into fists. All around him, students gathered in shocked clusters, whispering. Some looked uncomfortable, others snickered. A few kept stealing glances at Andrew, waiting for his reaction. Principal Wilson pushed through the crowd, his face grim. Everyone inside. First period starts in 10 minutes. What about the robotics meet? Andrew asked, stepping forward. The Eastside team will be here at noon. The principal looked at the graffiti, then back at Andrew. We'll try to get it cleaned up, but I think it might be best to postpone. No, Andrew interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. We've been planning this for weeks. We can't let them win. For a moment, the principal looked like he might argue. Then he nodded slowly. All right, but we need to get this cleaned up before they arrive. I'll help, Andrew offered immediately. Me too, came a voice beside him. It was Mike, looking determined. Count me in, Leon added. By second period, word had spread. When Andrew arrived at the main entrance with buckets and brushes the janitor had provided, he found not just the STEM club members waiting, but dozens of other students too. Some he barely knew, others he recognized from classes. We've heard what happened, explained Diane from his English class. It's not right. We want to help. For the next 2 hours, they worked together, scrubbing away the hateful words. Someone brought a portable speaker, and music filled the air as they worked. Andrew found himself painting next to students who had never spoken to him before, laughing at jokes and sharing stories. It's coming off. Someone called excitedly as the last letter began to fade. But Andrew had a different idea forming. What if we don't just clean it? He suggested. What if we paint something new? By the time the Eastside team arrived, the wall had been transformed. Where ugly words had been, there was now a colorful mural showing hands of different colors joined together around images of robots, rockets, and science symbols. Andrew stood proudly with his team as the bus from Eastside pulled up. The visitors stepped off, looking uncertain at first, until they saw the mural and the crowd of Westfield students waiting to welcome them. We're really glad you're here, Andrew said, stepping forward to shake hands with the Eastside team captain. We've got a lot to learn from each other. The robotics meet was a success beyond what Andrew had imagined. The teams worked together smoothly, sharing ideas and solving problems. By the end of the day, they had already started planning for the competition. As people were leaving, Mr. Daniels pulled Andrew aside. The principal called a staff meeting for Monday, he said quietly. After what happened today, all those students coming together, he wants to talk about new policies for addressing racism and bullying in the school. Andrew nodded, taking in the weight of this change. Do you think it will make a difference? I think it already has, Mr. Daniels replied, gesturing to the groups of students still chatting together, Westfield and Eastside, no longer separate. That evening, as Andrew walked to his dad's car, he spotted Tim leaning against the school wall, watching everyone leave. For once, Tim was alone. His usual group of friends were nowhere to be seen. Andrew had noticed some of them actually helping with the cleanup earlier. Their eyes met briefly across the parking lot. Tim looked away first. "Everything okay?" Andrew's dad asked as he got in the car. Andrew smiled, looking back at the school with its new mural shining in the afternoon sun. "Yeah," he said. "I think it's getting there." The first day of sophomore year felt nothing like Andrew's first day at Westfield High. As he climbed the steps to the main entrance, he didn't keep his head down or try to make himself invisible. He walked tall, nodding hello to familiar faces and smiling at the freshmen who looked as nervous as he once had. "Andrew, wait up," called a voice behind him. It was Leon, running to catch up. "Did you see the announcement board? They posted the student government results early." Andrew's heart jumped. Last spring, after much encouragement from his STEM club members, he had decided to run for student vice president. The campaign had been intense, putting up posters, giving a speech in front of the whole school, answering questions about his vision for Westfield. For a kid who once couldn't even speak up in class, it had been a huge step. "I haven't checked yet," Andrew admitted, kinda nervous. "Well, I checked for you," Leon grinned, slapping Andrew's shoulder. "Congratulations, Mr. Vice President." For a moment, Andrew couldn't find words. He had won? Actually won? Around him, other students began to notice, coming over to offer congratulations. The girl who had won president, Tanya from Debate Club, found him in the crowd. "We're gonna make some real changes this year," she said, high-fiving him. "First cabinet meeting is Thursday after school." As Andrew made his way to first period, he couldn't help marveling at how different things were now. The STEM club had expanded into 3 specialized groups: robotics, green engineering, and coding for community. Each group now had its own student leaders, allowing Andrew to focus on his new role in student government and his ongoing mentorship work. That was the project he was most proud of, the mentoring program. After the successful robotics partnership with Eastside, Andrew had worked with Dr. Thomas to create a system where Westfield students could mentor younger kids from all over the district. They held weekend workshops on the university campus, teaching everything from basic science concepts to advanced coding skills. Watching high schoolers who once barely spoke to each other now working side by side to help middle schoolers was something that still made Andrew smile. At lunch, Andrew sat with his usual mix of friends from STEM club and other activities. Their table was no longer tucked away in a corner, it was in the center of the cafeteria, and often had newcomers joining to talk about project ideas or student government proposals. As Andrew was explaining his plans for a sustainability initiative to Diane, the cafeteria suddenly hushed. Andrew looked up to see what had caught everyone's attention. A boy stood in the cafeteria entrance, backpack clutched tightly, eyes darting nervously around the room. He was clearly new, and from the way he shifted uncomfortably under the stairs, Andrew instantly recognized the feeling. But what made the scene especially notable was that the boy was black, only the second black student besides Andrew in the whole school. Andrew felt a strange sense of déjà vu, like watching his own experience about to repeat itself. But this time, things could be different. Without hesitation, Andrew stood up and walked across the cafeteria. He could feel eyes on him, including the gaze of Tim, who still attended Westfield but mostly kept to himself these days. Andrew reached the new student and extended his hand. "I'm Andrew. Welcome to Westfield." The boy looked surprised, then relieved. "I'm David. Today's my first day." "I remember my first day," Andrew said. "Let me show you around. Things are different here now." As they walked back to Andrew's table, where his friends were already making space, Andrew briefly thought about how far he'd come. A year ago, he had been the outsider, the target, the one eating alone. Now he was introducing a new student to a community that, while not perfect, had grown in ways nobody could have predicted. Later that afternoon, Andrew met with Dr. Thomas on the university campus. The summer program had turned into a year-round mentorship, with Andrew spending Tuesdays and Thursdays working in a lab. "I've got news," Dr. Thomas announced as Andrew set up his experiment. "That scholarship we applied for came through. Full ride if you maintain your grades." Andrew blinked, taking in what that meant. College was no longer just a dream, but a plan with a clear path. And, Dr. Thomas continued, the National Science Competition accepted your team's entry. You'll be presenting in Washington, D.C. next month. As Andrew walked home that evening, he thought about all the pieces that had fallen into place since that terrible day when he'd found his science project destroyed. He thought about the bullies who had tried to break him, never realizing they had only forced him to discover just how unbreakable he truly was. The path ahead wasn't perfectly smooth. There would always be challenges and people who would try to stand in his way. But Andrew wasn't worried. He was unstoppable now.